Hello everybody. I am Dr. Maya Hindukar, Dean, Professor and Head of the Department Periodontology, Government Dental College, Aurangabad. Today I am going to cover gingival pathology. Now this is a very important topic because unless you know the pathology, you cannot treat the disease, you cannot prevent the disease. And these are the contents of my topic. I am going to cover defense mechanism of gingiva, which includes gingival clavicular fluid, saliva, gingival inflammation, clinical features of gingivitis, gingival enlargement, acute gingival lesions, gingival diseases in childhood, and disfigurative gingivitis. At the end, I am also going to tell you about which are the different questions they have been asked till now on this topic. Now, what is defense mechanism of gingiva? Now, dear students, you know that gingival tissue is constantly subjected to mechanical and bacterial aggressions. Saliva, epithelial surface, and the gingival clavicular fluid, it provides resistance to these mechanical and bacterial aggressions. Now, gingival clavicular fluid. Now, these are the different methods of collection of gingival clavicular fluid. You can use absorbing paper strips, twisted threads, you can use micropipettes and gingival washings. Now, how to measure the volume of gingival clavicular fluid? Staining, weighing, and even you can use periotrol. Now, questions, SAQ can be asked to you on gingival clavicular fluid. So, if the patient has been asked to you on gingival clavicular fluid, you have to mention all these things. Now, this is the composition of gingival clavicular fluid. It contains cellular components like epithelial cells, neutrophils, monocytes, macrophages, lymphocytes in that T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes. Different electrolytes are sodium, potassium, calcium. It contains carbohydrates, proteins and lipids. These are the organic compounds. It also contains inflammatory mediators like immunoglobulins, prostaglandins E, C-reactive proteins, immunoglobulin, interleukin 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, tumor necrosis factor alpha, interferon alpha. It also contains host-derived enzymes and their inhibitors, bone-specific proteins, metabolic and bacterial products, that is lactic acid, hydroxyproline, endotoxins, urea, cytotoxic substances, different antibacterial factors, and it also contains tissue breakdown products. Now, leukocytes in the dentogingival area, it constitutes the defense mechanism of gingiva. In response to chemotactic gradients, leukocytes move by active locomotion through the intracellular spaces to reach the bottom of gingival sulcus. It contains 97% of neutrophils, 1 to 2% of lymphocytes, 2 to 3% of monocytes. And in the mononuclear leukocytes, it contains 24% of T lymphocytes, 58% of B lymphocytes, and mean T cell to B cell ratio is 1:3. Now we'll see about the saliva. Saliva has protective functions and it maintains the oral tissue in a physiologic state. Now, saliva, it exerts a major influence on plaque by mechanically cleansing the exposed oral surfaces, buffering acids produced by bacteria and modulating bacterial activity with immune mediators. So, saliva also plays an important role in defense mechanism of oral cavity. Now, these are the different functions of saliva. Glycoproteins and mucoids present in salivary components. It gives the lubrication. Physical flow of saliva, it gives a cleansing action, and by which there is a clearance of debris and bacteria. Bicarbonate and phosphate components of saliva, it gives the buffering action and it acts as an antacid. Minerals contents of saliva, It causes the maturation and remineralization of tooth, thereby maintaining the tooth integrity and tooth maintenance. Immunoglobulin present in saliva, that is IgA, lysozyme, lactoperoxidase, it gives the antibacterial action to saliva. Thereby, there is a control of bacterial colonization. There it breaks the bacterial cell wall and there is an oxidation of susceptible bacteria. Saliva contains electrolytes, that is sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, chloride, bicarbonate and phosphate. Major salivary proteins are alpha amylases, acidic proline-rich proteins, basic proline-rich proteins, glycosylated proline-rich proteins, carbonic anhydrase, cysteines, peroxidase, superperoxidase dismutase, lactate dehydrogenase, and matrix metalloproteinase. Different salivary steroid hormones are cortisol, testosterone, progesterone, estradiol, and aldosterone. What is the role of saliva in periodontal pathology? Saliva modulates plaque initiation, maturation, and metabolism. Salivary flow and composition, it also influences the calculus formation, thereby periodontal disease and caries formation. In humans, increase of inflammatory salivary, inflammatory gingival conditions, dental caries, rapid tooth destruction, and cervical or cemental caries are associated at least partially with decreased salivary gland secretion. So, whenever there is a xerostomia, the prevalence of cervical and cemental caries is increased. Also, the prevalence of periodontal disease is increased. Now, we will see which are the different stages of gingival inflammation. Now, the different stages of gingival inflammation are divided as an initial lesion, early lesion, established lesion, and the advanced lesion. Now, in the initial lesion, which usually develops within 2 to 4 days, there is a vascular dilatation, there is an infiltration of polymorphonuclear cells, perivascular loss of collagen is there, increase in the gingival clavicular fluid flow. Now, there is no as such clear-cut demarcation of initial lesion and early lesion, but if initial lesion is not treated, it progresses to early lesion. At 4 to 7 days, there is a vascular proliferation, the epithelial attachment, there is a formation of reticles. At the site, lymphocytes they reach, there is an increased loss of collagen around the infiltrate, there is a bleeding on probing. At 14 to 21 days, you can see the established lesion of gingivitis, there is a blood stasis, plasma cells they reach at the site, there is a loss of collagen, and you can see the clinical changes in the form of change in color, size, and texture of gingiva. Now, in the advanced stage, there is an extension of the lesion into the alveolar bone, which is characterized as a fourth stage, and there is a breakdown of the periodontal ligament. Microscopically, you can see fibrosis of the gingiva, and there is a presence of the plasma cells in the connective tissue. Now, we will see the gingiva in health and disease. Dear students, now this table is helpful to you whenever you go for recording of the case history in your clinical or practical examination. Now, gingiva in health is coral pink in color. Now, this color is due to the vascular subplaque to the gingiva. It is also due to the thickness and degree of the keratinization of the epithelium. Sometimes the color of the gingiva is grayish black in color, which is due to the melanin pigmentation of the gingiva. When there is a chronic gingivitis, there is a vascular proliferation, there is a reduction of the keratinization, there is a compression by the inflamed tissue, there is a venous stasis. In acute gingivitis, there is a tissue necrosis, In anal also there is a tissue necrosis, and because of this there is a color change from normal coral pink to reddish blue, deep blue. Now, depending upon which part of the gingiva is affected, you can see marginal gingivitis, diffuse gingivitis, and color changes may be shiny slate grey to dull whitish blue. Now, normal contour of the gingiva is scallop and knife-edge of marginal gingiva, and interdental papilla, anteriorly it is pyramidal in shape and posteriorly it is tent-shaped. Now, whenever there is a chronic gingivitis, whenever there are inflammatory changes, contour get changed. In marginal gingiva, it is rolled and rounded. In the interdental papilla, it is blunt and flat. When there is an punch out crater in the interdental papilla, you can see. When you can see the Strillman's cleft and Macau's fistule due to the trauma from occlusion, there is an enlargement of the interdental papilla and the marginal gingiva. In Strillman's cleft, you can see the apostrophe shaped indentations. In Macau's fistules, you can see the lifesaver-like enlargement. Normally, in healthy gingiva, consistency is firm and resilient. In chronic gingivitis, it changes to soggy and puffiness consistency. There is a pitting on pressure. There is a marked softness and friability consistency when the gingiva is exudative, which is due to the infiltration by fluid and inflammatory cells. Sometimes the gingiva is fibrotic in nature, which is due to the degeneration of the epithelium, which is due to the fibrosis, and that time the consistency is firm and leathery. Normally, the size of the gingiva, it is due to the total bulk of cellular and intercellular content along with its muscular supply. Whenever there is a gingival enlargement, there is an increase in fiber component and decrease in cellular component, and size is increased. Now, normally stippling is present. You have to check for stippling at the attached gingiva and the interdental papilla. Dear students, in the examination, usually you have to demonstrate for the stippling. Now, that time you have to dry the gingiva with the help of the cotton, and in the daylight you can show that the depressions and elevations present on the attached gingiva and in the interdental papilla. Now, this stippling is present due to the attachment of the gingival fiber to the underlying bone. Microscopically, papillary layer of the connective tissue projects into the elevations, due to which stippling is present. Now, the stippling is lost when there are exudative chronic gingivitis changes which are present. It is lost due to the destruction of the gingival fiber as a result of inflammation. In dyspymetal gingivitis, there is a pilling of surface. Usually, the position of the gingiva is 1 millimeter above CE junction. Now, whenever there is a gingival recession, when pseudopockets are present, the position of the gingiva gets changed. It can be either apically placed or it can be either coronally placed. The different factors which are responsible for the change in the position are either it can be due to the toothbrush trauma, sometimes there is a high cranial attachment, tooth malposition, or friction for the soft tissue. Normally, bleeding on probing is not present because there is an intact cellular epithelium and capillaries are normal. But when chronic gingivitis is present, when there is an anner or when systemic diseases are present, bleeding on probing is present. Now, the dilatation and the engorgement of the capillaries is present, or there can be a thinning and ulceration of the cellular epithelium, due to which there can be a bleeding on probing. Now, we'll see about the gingival enlargement. What is gingival enlargement? It can be either a hyperplasia or it can be a hypertrophy. Now you see what is hyperplasia. Hyperplasia, it is an abnormal increase in the number of normal cells in the normal arrangement in an organ or tissue which increase in volume. Whereas hypertrophy, it is an enlargement or overgrowth of an organ or part due to an increase in size of its constituent cells. And gingival enlargement, it is a combination of hypertrophy, hyperplasia and fibrosis. Now this is the classification of gingival enlargement. It can be an inflammatory enlargement, maybe chronic or acute. Drug-induced enlargement, enlargement associated with systemic diseases or conditions. It can be a condition enlargement, pregnancy, puberty, vitamin C deficiency or plasma cell gingivitis. Now, full patient can be asked to you on gingival enlargement. Non-specific condition enlargement, systemic diseases causing gingival enlargement, leukemia, granulomatous diseases, that is Wegener's granulomatosis, sarcoidosis, neoplastic enlargement, gingival tumors, benign tumors, malignant tumors, or false enlargement. Now, these are the differences between acute enlargement and the chronic enlargement. Acute enlargement starts as a slight ballooning of the interinguinal papilla and marginal gingiva. It is swelling around the involved teeth. It progresses slowly and painlessly, unless it is complicated by acute infection or the trauma. Chronic enlargement, it starts as a discrete sessile or pediculated mass. It can be interproximal or located on the marginal or the attached gingiva. Painful ulcerations usually are a secondary complication to any of the other types of enlargement, creating a combined gingival enlargement. Acute enlargement usually caused by mechanical, chemical or physical irritation. Trauma is the main etiology and resolved by removal of the irritant. Chronic enlargement, it is commonly associated with microbial biofilm. Gingiva appears as red and edematous with a diffuse surface shininess of the exposed area. Maxillary anterior region is commonly involved. Now we'll see about the drug-induced gingival enlargement. Phenytoin, nifedipine and the cyclosporine. These are the three commonly involved drugs in drug-induced gingival overgrowth. Genetic factors, drug dosage and local factors can affect the development and the severity of drug-induced gingival overgrowth. It is frequently results in impaired oral hygiene, biofilm accumulation and gingival inflammation. Because of the gingival overgrowth, patient cannot maintain the oral hygiene, and because of that, again gingival overgrowth is increased. So this is a vicious circle. Now we will see about the clinical features. Now, anticonvulsant, that is phenytoin, a localized nodular enlargement of the interinguinal papilla. There is an increased thickening of the marginal tissues causing aesthetic and the functional problems such as malpositioning of the teeth. There is a difficulty in speech and impaired oral hygiene. Now, patients on nifedipine, interinguinal papillas are affected and overgrowth is limited to the attached and the marginal gingiva. Now, overgrowth caused due to the intake of immunosuppressants, that is cyclosporine, lesions are more inflamed and bleed more. Now, if you see the prevalence is more with phenytoin, it is 50%, whereas with nifedipine, range is more, that is 6 to 83%, and it is 30% with cyclosporine. Now, why these different drugs? It causes gingival enlargement. Now, drug-induced gingival growth, it affects the extracellular matrix metabolism by decreasing collagenase activity and increasing the production of matrix proteins. So, two possible mechanisms are, one is phenytoin, it stimulates the proliferation of fibroblast-like cells and epithelium, and another is phenytoin. It induces a decrease in collagen degradation as a result of the production of an inactive fibroblastic collagenase. Now, drug enlargement due to cyclosporine is a hypersensitivity response to the cyclosporine. Cyclosporine A also decreases expression of matrix metalloproteinase 1 and matrix metalloproteinase 3, which can be related to accumulation of extracellular matrix components. Now we'll see about the calcium channel blockers. They have inhibitory effects on calcium ion influx across cell membranes, which may lead to decreased synthesis and function of intracellular collagenases, thus decreasing collagen degradation. Now, how to manage this gingival enlargement? Now, in this, you have to eliminate the local factors. So, you have to perform phase 1 therapy, perform scaling and root planing, put the patient on plaque control regime, go for regular follow-up examination, then withdrawal of the drug. Whatever drug patient is taking, patient is referred to the physician. Substitute drug is to be given to the patient. Then patient is kept on follow-up examination for 3 to 6 months. Call the patient for follow-up examination. After 3 to 6 months, you again check the patient. You will see definitely reduction in the gingival overgrowth, and then you decide which surgery is needed in the patient. Now, decision of the surgery, it depends upon whether the underlying bone is involved. Now, if the underlying bone is involved, then the flap surgery is needed. If underlying bone is not involved, then gingivectomy and the gingivoplasty is sufficient. So, this is a management of drug-induced gingival enlargement. Then we will see about the gingival diseases in childhood. Now, gingiva in the childhood is slightly different than gingiva in adolescence. Gingiva is paping and firm. 56% of the between ages 3 and 10 years stippling is present. Interdental gingiva is broad facial-lingually and tends to be relatively narrow mesiodistally. Mean sulcus depth is 1 to 2 mm. The width of the attached gingiva is greater in the incisor area. It decreases over the cuspids and it increases again over the premolars and permanent molars. Radiographically, lamina dura is wider in deciduous dentition. Even marrow spaces of the bone are larger. Crest of the interdental bony septa are flat with bony crest within 1 to 2 mm of C junction. Now we'll see which are the coronary diseases common in childhood. Chronic marginal gingivitis is the most prevalent type. There is change in color, size and consistency and surface texture. It is similar to chronic inflammation in adults. Bleeding can increase in pocket depths, but not that often. Inflammatory response is dominated by B lymphocytes, hence rarely progresses to periodontitis. Now, puberty gingivitis is common in childhood, usually affected age is 11 to 13 years. Bleeding and inflammation in the interproximal area is the most frequent manifestation. Primary cause is the dental plaque, usually resolves after puberty. Eruption gingivitis is very common. Tooth itself does not cause the gingivitis. Inflammation is caused by the plaque accumulation, perhaps secondary to discomfort caused by brushing in the tribal areas. Gingiva also appears red due to lack of keratinization in that area. Localized juvenile spongiotic gingival hyperplasia. It is unrelated to plaque accumulation. Pathogenesis is not known. The lesions are localized patches on the attached gingiva. They are bright red, raised overgrowth, painless, associated with easy bleeding. Most commonly seen on the anterior labial, maxillary and mandibular area. Most commonly affected age group is 8 to 14 years. Then aggressive parodontitis. Early onset of the disease occurs around the time of puberty. It is an interproximal attachment loss on at least two permanent first molars and incisors, with attachment loss on no more than 2 teeth other than first molars and the incisors. It is a localized form common in pubertal age. Generalized form of aggressive parodontitis, which is defined as a generalized interproximal attachment loss, including at least 3 teeth that are not first molars and incisors, but it is rare among the children. Now we will see what treatment you can give to pedo patients. Medical and dental history should be recorded for each child. You need not record the parodontal indices unless aggressive parodontitis. Quick screening usually is sufficient for children up to the age of 11 years. But pedo patients need counseling for toothbrushing, plaque removal and balance diet. Also counseling of the parent is needed. Then we will see which are the acute gingival conditions in periodontology. In that, first is the necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis. Now, necrosis and the sloughing of the gingival tissues is necrotizing ulcerative gingivitis. It may be accompanied by systemic symptoms like fever, malaise, lymphadenopathy. Punch out crater-like depressions at the crest of the interdental papillae are present. Surface of the crater is covered by grey pseudomembranous slough. Spontaneous gingival hemorrhage and the pronounced bleeding after the slightest stimulation is present. There is an increased salivation, fetid odor. And common etiology is fusoparietal complex. Now, what is the treatment? In the first visit, you take the detailed history of the patient, perform the examination of the oral cavity, give the topical anesthesia to the lesions, remove the pseudomembrane, and non-attached surface debris are removed. Patient is also told to rinse the mouth every 2 hours with a glass full of an equal mixture of warm water and 3% of hydrogen peroxide. Patients those who are having systemic symptoms like local lymphadenopathy or fever, they have a prescribed antibiotic regimen, that is penicillin. You can give amoxicillin 500 mg every 6 hours. You can give metronidazole 500 mg twice daily for 7 days. It is also effective. And antibiotics are continued until the systemic complications or the local lymphadenopathy have subsided. If the patient is having severe pain, you can prescribe anti-inflammatory analgesics to the patient. Then we will see about the primary herpetic gingival stomatitis. This is a viral disease caused by herpes simplex virus type 1. Most often seen amongst the infants and the children who are younger than 6 years. Erythematous, shiny involvement of the gingiva and the adjacent oral mucosa. Edema and the gingival bleeding is present, characterized by discrete spherical gray vesicles which can occur on the gingiva, labial and the buccal mucosae, soft palate and the tongue. Sometimes patient also complains of fever and the lymphadenopathy. Treatment is give the pain control measures, topical anesthetics like 2% lidocaine, 0.1% diclonine hydrochloride. In some cases, systemic administration of analgesics is also needed. Topical anti-infective agents, it is given to prevent secondary infections. 0.2% chlorhydrin, gluconate or tetracycline mouthwash can be given. Ask the patient to maintain proper hydration and electrolyte balance. Maintenance of good oral hygiene is needed. Antipyretics can also be given to control the fever. Antiviral drugs, that is acyclovir in optimal dosages, that is 1000 to 1600 milligram daily for 7 to 10 days is to be given. Third condition is a pericoronitis. It is an inflammation of the gingiva in relation to the crown of an incompletely erupted tooth. It occurs most often in the mandibular third molar area. It can be acute, subacute or chronic. And it occurs due to the accumulation of the food debris between the crown of the tooth and the overlying gingival flap. Clinically, you can see red, swollen, separating lesion that is exquisitely tender with radiating pains to the ear, throat and floor of the mouth, foul smell. Patient is having either extraoral swelling, intraoral swelling. Patient is having trismus. Patient also complains of lymphadenopathy and the fever. So in that cases, you have to examine the patient thoroughly for extraoral swelling, intraoral swelling, and then treatment is you prescribe the antibiotics to the patient, anti-inflammatory analgesics to the patient, then perform irrigation, remove the food debris which are present intraorally, proper debridement, ask the patient to go for saline gargles, then chlorhexidine gargles, advise radiograph, and depending upon the position of the third molar, either operculectomy or the extraction of the third molar. Then we'll see about the disc palmative gingivitis. Now, disc palmative gingivitis is a clinical feature, it is not a diagnosis. And it is described as a reaction characterized by intense erythema, desquamation, and ulceration of the free and the attached gingiva. It ranges from mild burning sensation to intense pain. Approximately 50% of the disc palmative gingivitis cases are localized to the gingiva. Lichen planus and cicatricial pemphigoid account for 84% of the disc palmative gingivitis cases. Now, in such patients, you can also see the skin lesions. Now, these are the diagnostic findings for the conditions that can manifest as disc palmative gingivitis. Now, these are the different diseases and their histopathological features where you can see the disc palmative gingivitis. Now, in pemphigus, histopathologically you can see the intraepithelial clefting above the basal cell layer, and basal cells have a characteristic tombstone appearance, acantholysis, and you can see the intercellular antibodies. In cicatricial pemphigoid, there is a subepithelial clefting with epithelial separation from the underlying lamina propria, leaving an intact basal layer. The same finding you can see with bullous pemphigoid also. In chronic ulcerative stomatitis, similar to erosive lichen planus, there is a hyperkeratosis, acanthosis, basal cell layer, liquefaction, subepithelial clefting, and lymphohistiocytic chronic infiltrate in a band-like configuration. In linear IgA disease, the findings are similar to erosive lichen planus. In dermatitis, herpetiformis, there is a collection of neutrophils, eosinophils, and fibrin in the connective tissue papillae. In SLE, that is systemic lupus erythematosus, there is a hyperkeratosis, there is a basal cell degeneration, there is a epithelial atrophy, and there is a perivascular inflammation. Now, we'll see the therapeutic approaches for treating selected conditions that manifest as disc palmative gingivitis. In erosive lichen planus, you have to give the therapeutic agent that is Elidex, which contains 0.05% of fluosinonide gel for topical application. And in severe or in refractory cases, you have to refer the patient to dermatologist for management with systemic corticosteroids. So the management for desquamative gingivitis is a topical application of corticosteroids, and in severe and refractory cases, the systemic administration of the corticosteroid is needed. In cicatricial pemphigoid, Lidex 0.05% fluocinolone gel, you can give Temovate, that is 0.05% clobestrol propionate. Now, in cicatricial pemphigoid, along with prednisone, that is 20 to 30 milligram per day, the immunosuppressant, that is azathioprine, is also given by dermatologists for the treatment of desquamative gingivitis. So, in pemphigus, refer to dermatologist for management with prednisone 20 to 30 milligram per day. Concomitant use of azathioprine may be needed. In chronic ulcerative stomatitis, Lidex 0.05% fluocinolone gel is to be given. So at the end, I would like to tell you that proper diagnosis of gingival pathology helps in prevention, early interception, and progression of gingival and peroneal diseases. Early diagnosis and treatment plays an important role in arresting and reversing the disease, as further progression might lead to more severe destruction of the periodontium and the associate structure to an irreversible stage. These are my references. So as I told you, these are the questions. This is a question bank from 1990 to 2015. I feel that this question bank will really help you in preparing for your final examination. So please use this question bank and prepare for your examination. So my dear students, I hope this lecture must be very helpful to you for preparation of subject of periodontology, and thank you for your time. Thank you.